comes back, we'll go into our next meeting. Going to call to order our meeting for January 14th, 2019 at 7:03 p.m. First item this evening is roll call. Ms. Eicher.
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker.
Here.
Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Redemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Sosowski.
Here.
Mr. Baker, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item this evening is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration. Are there any additional items that this board would like to bring forth for consideration? If not, is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 4. This evening we have a proclamation for Windsor School Choice Week. Whereas all children in Windsor should have access to the highest quality education possible. And whereas Windsor recognizes the important role that an effective education plays in preparing all students in Windsor to be successful adults. And whereas quality education is critically important to the economic vitality of Windsor. And whereas Windsor is home to a multitude of high-quality public and non-public schools from which parents can choose for their children, in addition to families who educate their children in the home. And whereas educational variety not only helps to diversify our economy, but also enhances the vibrancy of our community. And whereas Windsor has many high-quality teaching professionals in all types of school settings who are committed to educating our children. And whereas School Choice Week is celebrated across the country by millions of students, parents, educators, schools, and organizations to raise awareness of the needs for effective educational options. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of the Town of Windsor, do hereby recognize January 20th to the 26th, 2019 as Windsor School Choice Week. And I call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens. Thank you. Next item on the agenda this evening, Board Liaison Reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board, and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. The Tree Board did not meet in December. It was actually Christmas Eve, so they canceled that meeting. The next one is January 29th. The Historic Preservation met last week. There was supposed to be election of officers. There were not enough people in attendance to elect those officers, so it happened next meeting, April 10th. We got an update on the student presentations. Their materials will be on our website, hopefully soon. And they will be presenting before this board at a work session on February 11th. We also looked at the potential of having called historic signs regarding water, 2 around Windsor Lake. They had mock-ups, they were beautifully done. I think they're gonna look for grants and or come before the board at some point for money to do that. They're very nice. That's it.
Okay, Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
Both meetings were canceled due to the holiday this last month, but the Poudre River Trail Board will have a retreat in the next month, so we'll have a future update there. And with Parks, Recreation, and Culture, in February, we will start reviewing, rules and regulations of the parks. That would be things like the smoking policy, metal detectors, and various other topics that'll be coming up in the near future. That's all.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
Water and Sewer Board met last year, which was December. They had two presentations. One was on update of stormwater management procedures that the town is moving forward on. The other was an extensive report by our water manager, Mr. Thornhill, on our present water supplies and future needs. The Water and Sewer Board has traditionally been meeting every other month, but because of the concerns about water in northern Colorado, our existing supplies, future needs, future water projects, they will be meeting more regularly. The next meeting will be Wednesday morning, January 23rd.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
The biggest thing of interest, we had our January meeting actually already last Wednesday, where we found out who the new board members are on the chamber. We had two newly elected board members and one that was appointed to fill a vacancy by a member of our board who died within the last year. And those new board members are Andrew Gutterson from the American National Life Insurance Company, Ryan Reagan, who works at First National Bank, and those were the two that were elected by the chamber members. And the appointment to fill our vacancy that we've had, which is only for a one-year term, was nominated to be Katie Van Meter, that some of us know. So she's on the chamber board now. So other than that, just normal business that was attended to this month.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
No report on the Great Western Trail Authority, and the Housing Authority has a meeting scheduled for tomorrow.
Okay. Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Yeah, Mayor, the Planning Commission did cancel their meeting as well at the end of last year, so there's not been a commission meeting since our last board meeting. Same was true of the library board. The board meeting itself is coming up at the end of the month. I guess just to remind the board that there is an interview process going on. The library board does have 3 vacant positions on the board plus a vacant alternate position. And the board, the town board does have a obligation to have a person on the interview committee that would be interviewing candidates for those open positions and making recommendations. I don't know the dates of that interview process. I believe it will start sometime in January. And as I had mentioned, I will be out on vacation on a trip from the tomorrow until the 24th. So if it occurs during that time, you'll have to appoint someone else to be that interview committee member.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority and North Front Range MPO. I don't have anything since my last report for the Downtown Development Authority. We meet this Wednesday at 7:30 in the downstairs first floor conference room. North Front Range MPO did meet January 23rd. We did receive a 2018 annual report, so I'm just going to mention just a couple of those highlights from the 2018 annual report. So mobility accomplishments for 2018, they distributed 500 rider's guides. Over 600 people used the Find My Ride, the online component to finding a ride. In 2018, the Senior Transportation Coalition sponsored a one-time senior travel training, and the Larimer County Senior Transportation Work Group that formed following the July 2017 adoption of the Larimer County Senior Transportation Needs Assessment applied and was awarded 2 grants in 2018. Both grants are going to help fund activities to implement a one-call, one-click center on behalf of the county. So again, we're looking forward to looking at that and hopefully bringing that to fruition in the very near future. What that would be is it would be a one-stop place where if you are a senior or somebody in need of transportation services, you could go to a one-stop shop, and all of the different services available to you would be there in one place, rather than you having to make several calls and searching for all those things yourself. The Van Gogh program, accomplishments for 2018. So the Van Gogh program was started in 1994 with 9 vans in daily operation being used by about 45 individuals. Jump ahead to 2018, the program is strong today at 50 routes with over 250 committed participants, running at an 87 occupancy rate, which means that we are reducing congestion and emissions on the roadways. And plus, this pool is one of the rare things that you will find that actually it's paying for itself. It is not subsidized, but it is paying for itself with the ridership that the program utilizes. The other big announcements, of course, in 2018 is construction update on our North I-25 Express Lane project. So if you haven't noticed, work is underway to construct the express lanes in each direction of North I-25 from State Highway 402 to State Highway 14. Currently, the construction is focused between Crossroads Boulevard and State Highway 392 and near State Highway 402. Then we got a very special surprise in late November, because we got an additional $20 million awards that helped us secure so that segment 5 can be 100% completed on that project. So those are just some of the things, the highlights of the MPO for 2018. And moving forward now in 2019, I am going to be acting as the chair of the MPO, as well as I will be representing on the STAC committee, and I will be on the executive board and the PAL committee as well. Moving on to item 6. Item 6 this evening is our public invited to be heard. This is for individuals wishing to participate to be heard on a non-agenda item. You would be requested, did anybody sign up?
Actually, the sign-in sheet's still out there. I didn't have time to grab it.
Okay. Somebody want to grab that for me and see? Do we have anybody sign up? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. So we do have a couple of folks who have requested this evening to come forward. So when I announce your name, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then you will be given your 3 minutes to speak. Again, this is for individuals wishing to speak on a non-agenda item. And one of you has indicated you have handouts, so when you come and you have those handouts, if you would please present them to Ms. Eicher here on the end, and then she'll distribute them through the board accordingly, okay? So the first person we have this evening is Gloria Belden.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and everyone on the board. My name is Gloria Belden, and I'm going to emphasize I am a native 5 generations of Windsor, Colorado. My issue is on the drag queen. As a young girl and going to kindergarten, I would go to the library while my mom would come back and pick me up from there, but I was always there in the library afterwards. But I remember that it was wonderful. My concerns are with this drag queen that there's mental issues with these issues, and we really need to focus on help for them. And we don't even know if they have any crime backgrounds. And we don't need our school teachers to deal with any hassles from their behaviors or residues. And our parents, and also I do have a petition that I will be door knocking, And the public needs to be aware of this. And I do have handouts describing all the mental issues about this situation. And also in the library, when they do have hires and that, I really do feel that they need to really do a background check on these folks, and that they do not bring in this kind of nonsense. It really does burn my biscuits, and that's nothing compared to the pit of hell, the way I feel about this. And that's what I want to say. And I'm not going to drop it until it is, there's no place for this in a library. A library is educational, and we need that for our children to learn to respect and to honor boundaries and not to be devalued in this type of format with this kind of behavior. Thank you.
If you'll give your handout then to Ms. Eikert. And then Amy Ingram.
Hi, I'm Amy Ingram, and my address is 516 Sherwood Court here in Windsor. I am here on behalf as well of the Drag Queen Story Hour. I attended this, and I personally saw some very hateful stuff within our town that exposed some young children to this. I did not see where this is a benefit to this town. I feel that there is something that needs to be done and addressed about this. It looks that it's going to continue in our town. We are presenting some informational about what is going on with these drag queen story hours and how it is affecting children all over the nation. And so my thing is just to get the awareness out there before this goes any further, in hopes that the town can help us with something with this, in the hopes that we can protect these children that need to be protected because they can't speak for themselves. So I'm going to drop this off so you guys can read it.
Thank you. Are you finished then?
Yes.
Ms. Ingram? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on then to item B.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'm not interested in engaging in any of this. I did attend the event. I was in there with my young son. And if anybody on the board is interested in hearing about it, what happened, I'd be happy to talk to you guys with coffee or after the meeting or whatever. So,
Okay.
it was a great event, by the way.
Moving on to item B, we have the consent calendar. There are 7 items on the consent calendar this evening for consideration.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar passes unanimously. Moving on to board action items. Under item C, our first action this evening is resolution number 2019-04. A resolution approving the final site plan for Eagle Crossing subdivision 8th filing, Lot 1, Larry Buckendorf, Morgan Kidder, Fossil Ridge Holdings LLC, the owner applicant, Daniel Hall, Land 1 Engineering LLC, owner applicant representative. It is quasi-judicial. Mr. Hornbeck will give presentation. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Board. This site plan has been reviewed in accordance with Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The site is located south of the recent extension of Steeplechase Drive at the intersection of Ward Avenue. Property is zoned MF2 multifamily 2. The proposal is for an additional 5 buildings and 111 units to the site plan that was previously approved. The previously approved site plan included the 4 buildings and 93 units on the eastern portion of the lot. The western portion is now being site planned as well. So there will be a total of 9 buildings and 204 units on this property. The site is approximately 4.6 acres, and parking is provided in accordance with the municipal code ratio of 1.5 spaces per unit that was in effect at the time the application was received. There's also a landscaped area of approximately 30% on the site. The buildings will match the existing, or the already approved buildings that are proposed for the site. They'll be 3 stories with sloped roofs. Horizontal fiber cement lap siding is the predominant finished material, along with stone treatment around the base and stairways. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, particularly Chapter 5B, Growth Framework, and Chapter 5C, Residential Areas Framework Plan. At their December 19th, 2018 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the final site plan, subject to all remaining Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, and recommendation. The applicant and representative are present, should there be any questions for them, and that's all I have.
Did the applicant or representative have anything further you wanted to add?
Madam Mayor, Board, Morgan Kidder, Falls Ridge Holdings LLC, 7251 West 20th Street, Greeley, Colorado. I do not. All the information was presented by Paul, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Are there any questions for either Mr. Sislowski and then Dr. Jones?
Thanks. Just one quick question. I looked over the summary of the project as presented here, I think in your application materials. There's a reference here to landscaping, and it references landscaping and irrigation. I guess my own passion here is whether there's a non-potable system in this development.
There is not a non-potable system in this area that we were able to tap into.
How many units, remind me?
111.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
Now, originally we approved 400 units. Is this part of the 400, or is this in addition to the 400?
This is additional. The area where these 5 new buildings are being proposed at this point in time was blocked by an oil and gas window. That has subsequently been negotiated and moved, allowing for the development of this additional site plan for these 5 buildings.
Okay, so we're looking at 500 units total?
Correct.
Approximately?
Approximately.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, is it all right if we go back to him and then Mr. Baker?
Just a quick follow-on. I guess, obviously, the related question, is this particular area serviced by Windsor Water?
This area is serviced by Fort Collins Local Water District.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
Thank you. Was there any interest in good faith of adding the parking to meet the current code versus the old code?
This is the first that I've been asked that, and in my opinion, at the time that this was submitted, it met current code.
Well, I know it did, and when you were here last time, I know that was a big concern with a lot of the residents because there's no parking on Steeplechase, so parking was a concern already for those
Certainly.
units, now you've added 100, and I kind of feel like we're compounding the parking problem potentially. I was just curious if there was no interest then.
No.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further that you would like to add, Mr. Hornbeck?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
And move that we approve resolution number 2019-04.
Second.
A motion on the floor for Mr. Bennett with a second for Mr. Rennemeyer approving resolution 2019-04. All in favor vote yes, opposed noes. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 2, ordinance number 2019-1582. An ordinance fixing the compensation of the municipal court judge and municipal court clerk for the town of Windsor in compliance with sections 13-10-107 and 13-10-109 Colorado Revised Statute and section 2-4-90 of the Windsor Municipal Code. Legislative action, and Ms. Emel will give us presentation. Ms. Emel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Board. This is an annual presentation that, at least since I've been here, I've been up in front of you every year, requesting that the court set, or that the Town Board set the compensation for the municipal judge and the municipal court clerk, which is required by state statute. What this ordinance purports to do is just to bring everything into compliance, and you, last month, you already approved and reappointed the judge and the deputy judge to their positions, and now this is just the annual setting of their compensation. It was approved in the budget for 2019 during the budget discussions. I have nothing really further to add unless you have
Any questions for Ms. Emel? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 2019-1582.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennermeyer with a second for Mr. Baker, approving ordinance 2019-1582. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 3, a public hearing. An ordinance of the Town Board of the Town of Windsor, Colorado, approving the First Amendment to the service plan for the Ridge at Harmony Road Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 4, and authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the town and the districts. This is legislative action. Looks like Mr. McCarter is going to lead us off, but first I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Dr. Jones with a second from Mr. Rennermeyer to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now opened. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a legislative public hearing. It's not quasi-judicial. So it's information gathering in support of a request by the districts to amend their service plan. David O'Leary is here representing the districts, and you have appointed Carolyn Steffel to serve as your special counsel when it comes to metropolitan districts. Carolyn and David have been working over about the last month on some changes to the service plan as initially presented by Mr. O'Leary, and they have worked out the details. I've just been the referee, making certain that they get together and that they're here tonight to explain to you the reasons behind the service plan amendment and any concerns that have been addressed in the process over the last month. So let's start. I think it's wise to start with Mr. O'Leary, just to explain why he's making his proposed amendment, and then Ms. Steffel can comment further if there are any questions. David?
Hello, Madam Mayor and Town Board members. My name is David O'Leary. I'm with the law firm of Spencer Fain in Denver. I'm here on behalf of the Ridge at Harmony Road and Metropolitan Districts. Currently, there's 3 districts, 1 through 3, and the proposal is to increase it to 4 districts, 1 through 4. When the service plan was originally approved, the initial boundaries contemplated 186 acres approximately. There was a 263 acre future inclusion area. So a lot of the projections back in 2014 and a lot of the capital financial, everything was based on the initial boundaries. We had anticipated coming back at some point in time for an amendment, but now those properties have been annexed to the town. They've been included. All the statutory requirements for jurisdiction for the town have been met, and all the capital has been updated. In general, there was about $7.2 million of capital that was initially estimated, and now they're up to about $40 million of capital. And the financial pro forma that was provided by George K. Baum demonstrates the financial feasibility of discharging more debt. Originally, it was capped at $8 million per the service plan, and now we have a financial pro forma that has $32.99 million. In those financial projections that were provided by George K. Baum, we didn't provide any estimates for the commercial property. Commercial property wasn't originally put into its own district. We wanted to form a new commercial district so that property can be separated from the residential and developed independently of there. Those projections on both assessed valuation and capital costs have been not included because they don't have a projection right now of what's going in there. Typically when the commercial, if there was a big anchor or a bunch of commercial retail property that was anticipated, they would be able to provide those projections. We've asked for a little flexibility on those numbers to provide for that flexibility when they do come back and seek an approved development plan from the town on those additional improvements. Service plan was originally approved in 2014. The developer of the property is, or a representative on behalf of the developer of the property, Jeff Mark, is here on behalf of Eagle Development Company and HR Exchange LLC, which are the primary property owner and the developer of the property. The changes that are being proposed are for the pieces of property that don't have residents on it, so districts 1, 3, and 4, for that additional capital and additional debt. So that's from a 30,000-foot view, that's what they're proposing to do. It's basically an update to include all the property that was initially a future inclusion area and update both the capital and the financial pro forma to be what is actually realized today.
Are there any questions? Dr. Jones?
Yeah, you went from 7 million in improvements to 40 million, right?
Correct.
About 5+ fold increase. Yet the acreage only increased maybe a little more than double. I mean, was this big jump, was that because of the 7 million was just kind of a wild guess, or do you have increased density in the additional acreage? Or?
A lot of times, and I didn't do the original service plan, so I inherited it. A lot of times when you're doing your initial projections, it is a best guess or a wild guess. There were 450 acres total. At the time of formation, there was property that was in the town boundaries that was future inclusion. There was property that was in unincorporated Weld County that needed to be annexed. So some of those things couldn't be determined at the original time that they formed. As far as projections and density, there was no, for 263 out of the 450 acres, there were no projections for the financial, for capital, for financial feasibility for any of that debt. Some of that density wasn't anticipated or projected because they just didn't know. So some of those contingency factors have now been resolved, and now that they've annexed, and there are 2 of the 3 phases that are complete. They are known as Ridge 1, Ridge 2, and Ridge 3. Ridge 1 and Ridge 2, those capital costs are actually in the ground, completed. One of them is pending certification. And then the final phase has been submitted to town for final approval on phase 3. Those things weren't known in 2014, and they are now. So a lot of that residential density, we just didn't know. And we didn't know if that property would ultimately be included. So some of that density couldn't have been projected at the time of formation.
Thank you.
Mr. Sosowski?
Yes, sir. A couple questions, I guess, on the summary of the financing. You're asking for the mill levy limitations, 39 mills?
Correct, and that's
does
consistent with.
Sorry?
That's consistent with your other districts now and your town model.
Sorry?
That's consistent with your other districts that are approved in the town of Windsor,
Right.
and your town model.
And it adds to that subject to the Gallagher adjustment?
Yes.
So obviously, if the Gallagher ratio goes down again, will you be entitled to increase that 39
Yes.
mills?
Yes, and when that was already in the original service plan from 2014, we do actually anticipate that it drops again. So it went from 7.96 to 7.2. We anticipate another, 10 or 11% decrease.
Yeah, I've heard that. So the district will be able to increase the mills without voter approval?
Yes, for those adjustments. And the Gallagher adjustment, as you may or may not know, from a 30,000-foot view again, the adjustment's intended to have a net present is to have a net revenue neutral effect. So if the mill levy rises, it will meet whatever that would have been at 7.96%. Now it's 7.2%. So that mill levy increase should be the same amount of revenue that would have been generated had the residential assessment rate not dropped.
I mean, I understand that. Obviously, the fire district would love to have that authority.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, is that an authority that's derived from state statutes with respect to special?
It is. The Gallagher Amendment, so Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, was passed, I believe, in 92. And the Gallagher adjustment, Dennis Gallagher, who proposed the amendment, was to adjust for that, since the assessment rate was supposed to be a certain ratio between residential and commercial. Right. Weld County has just, broken the model as far as that because of oil and gas and the farmland, and the increases have been significant for residential, but not so significant for commercial. So I guess that short answer to your question is yes.
Well, I'm not sure it answered the question, quite frankly. My question was, where does the authority of the district to increase that mill levy? I realize to keep constant dollars.
Right.
But if the fire district tried to do that, they'd have to go to the voters for.
They would have to go back to the voters. So Tabor increases or voter increases for debt require a voter approval. A lot of the districts, and when this district was originally formed, there was a Tabor question that was asked, a Gallagherization question that was asked. And typically, a lot of special district attorneys will ask that as part of their election questions. So they'll have a Gallagherization or a de-Taborization element to most of their election questions.
So that's already been voted,
correct.
Essentially approved. That's so. I'm always curious when I look at the district map you have attached. There seems to be a fairly standard thing to have a tiny little District 1.
Yes.
Which I think is the operating, essentially parent overseeing district.
Yes.
But obviously the voters who will elect the board of that district are probably 5 people.
And they are, in most of those districts, when they're originally formed, there are the same people, the same 5 people. Laws have changed quite a bit, and the taxes have changed. So there were some tax cases passed in Florida that were adjustments and reads on IRS regulations that now require special districts to issue from a financing district rather than a control district. So even though that control district, the intent of it is to act like a manager would for an LLC, to coordinate all of the development and the financing and the intergovernmental agreements on behalf of the entire development. Right. And the idea being you're getting a consolidated service plan, consolidated financing. The reality of it is, from a financing perspective, because of tax considerations, we now are not able to issue from a control district scenario. Right. We have to either have a diversity of property ownership or a board that would eventually be subject to taking over by the residents. So that has changed quite a bit in the last 5 to 10 years. But it is still a standard. When a multiple district structure comes in, it is kind of a standard fare to find a control district situation, just because you have residential, commercial, multiple builders. Some of those things need to be coordinated so the project develops as a whole rather than little pieces.
So districts 2 and 3 will be the taxing district.
2, 3, and 4.
And 4?
Yeah.
And 4 is also a small district, is that?
It's small right now. It's a 5-acre parcel that's intended to be commercial. When the district was originally formed, the attorney that proposed the service plan originally proposed just director parcels, with everything being a future inclusion area. They didn't contemplate or allot for the possibility of a commercial district at that point in time. There is a difference between what's needed for a commercial and residential from either an operations or a mill levy perspective, and that'll allow for some sensitivity. If our market doesn't allow for 39 mills in a commercial district, they want the flexibility to reduce that mill levy to be sensitive to whatever the retailers or commercial properties would see.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
Yeah, I think I read somewhere in here where you don't plan on having HOAs, is that correct?
That's correct. So metro districts are allowed by another change in statute that happened to provide for almost all services that an HOA could provide through the metro district. It's a representative board of the residents, but typically those covenant controls and those covenant enforcements are provided through the district.
Yes.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay. This is the public hearing then. So I need to ask if there's any public input or not, because it's not legislative, Mr. McCarter.
Let's let Ms. Steffel comment a bit legally,
Okay.
given that she's your counsel. Give her a chance to comment, and then you can take comment from the public, if that's
Okay.
all right.
Thank you. I'm Carolyn Steffel from Moses, Woodmeyer, Harrison, and Woodruff, and I am your special counsel on special districts and metropolitan districts. And I just wanted to speak to a couple of the legal questions that were raised previously. So a metropolitan district has two legal limitations on it. One is that they have the limitations contained in the service plan, and they must act in accordance with the service plan or come back and get an amendment to the service plan before they materially deviate. The second one is that they must also have voter approval under Tabor for a tax increase or a rate increase. The district, what is being proposed by this amendment is a couple of things. One, creation of a new district number 4. That district number 4 has not been organized yet. We'll need to have an election to organize, and we'll need to have a Tabor election. So there will be another Tabor election. I just want to make sure that that was clear. The second thing is that there will also be another Tabor election for districts 3, 4, and 1. So district number 2 has residents in it already, and so the proposal from the districts is to keep the maximum debt for district number 2 at $8 million, and that used to be the debt limitation for all 3 districts, 1, 2, and 3. The proposal would be to keep that limitation at $8 million for district number 2. So they are not planning a new Tabor election for district number 2. So it is correct to say that their Tabor election they've had so far did contemplate Gallagher. What it did was it allowed the districts to impose a mill levy at a rate that was sufficient to repay the bonds without other legal limitations. So that's how they waived the Gallagher and the Tabor limitations and allowed them to go up. But your service plan that you approve is where it contains the other limitation. Policy-wise, it would be just fine to say you're capped at 39 mills and you're not allowed to Gallagherize or go over that 39 mills. That would not be consistent, however, with what you have adopted on a policy level for the town code and the model service plan and for other districts. So it has been your standard to allow that Gallagherizing, which is only going to increase that mill levy for residential properties, most likely not commercial properties, which would kind of be capped at the 39. Does that make some sense? Okay. The other part of this proposal is to increase the debt limitation for those districts 1, 3, and 4. So they would be required to have another Tabor election in order to increase it to that rate of $36 million. So what they're asking for is that new debt limitation for those 3 districts to be set at $36 million. One of the criteria you have to find to approve this is that the districts are capable of providing are capable and will have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness on a reasonable basis, and that's where it gets to the updated financial plans. Those show that they have the ability to discharge just shy of $33 million, and the districts have built in another 10% as a contingency, also keeping in mind that they haven't put in any assessed valuation for the commercial, because they're not sure how that's going to develop. So that's how I'm comfortable with that 10%, given that they haven't accounted for the commercial. But that's one of the findings you're going to have to make. So this is up for the board for the first reading of the ordinance. The IGA that is also a part of that ordinance is just going to be based on the model IGA that you have, updating it to reflect the 4th district and to reflect the new debt limitations. The town already has an IGA with districts 1 through 3, but we do feel that it's important to update that given the changes that are going to be here. The service plan still keeps the other limitations the same, with a 30-year debt limitation, the 30 mil Gallagherized combined debt limitation, and so those are the main points that I wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention procedurally what's happened to get here. So the districts have provided notice by publication of this public hearing and to the landowners within districts 1, 3, and 4 by mailing, and to any taxing entities within the 3-mile boundary. They will also be providing notice to all of the residents in district number 2 before the second reading. And so we're actually going to have a second public hearing in case any of those residents want to come in and speak, to make sure that everyone who might be impacted has had that notice. But This is not planning to increase the debt limitation for that district number 2. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Sosowski? Or
Oh, sorry.
I just want to clarify, I thought I heard you say the notification was done by mail.
It is, it was done, yes, and also publication in the newspaper as well. Mhm.
Okay, Mr. Sosowski?
No, sorry,
Oh,
Mr. Baker.
Mr. Baker?
So when this was originally passed, District 2 was the only one that existed, so all $8 million of improvements went on District 2?
No, at that time, there was district number 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And it was most of the square footage of what you see right now. It was, but there was the 260 acres that was proposed future inclusion. So that's what they had proposed for the entire service area for both what was already included and the proposed future inclusion area. They're now up to about 450 acres from the original around 190 acres.
Will the other districts still contribute to paying down that debt?
I'm gonna probably let David speak to that, but they are planning to have, he has explained to me, is that they're planning to have 2 debt issuances.
Okay.
And that and the service plan shows 2. It shows 1 issued in 2021, 1 in 2025. And they will probably, since they have 2 debt limitations, have one debt that will be paid by that district number 2, and a separate debt that would be paid by the other districts because of the higher amount that they can go. But all of the districts will be capped at that same mill levy for residential of 39 plus Gallagherization. So they won't be paying a higher mill levy rate than someone in district number 3 across the street or, on the other side, because they'll both be residential, but district number 3 may be responsible for more of the debt. He also indicated that they were separating out the improvements to determine what benefited just one district and what was a regional improvement that was benefiting multiple districts, so that they went out for the debt issuance, they would be able to, for district number 2, relate the debt to that district number 2. But for additional detail, I would suggest that you bring David back up to re-answer that question.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question for you before.
Sure, absolutely.
When you were just speaking, you mentioned the debt of 36 million. But then I think the amendment says a cap of 39.
I believe it says 36. If it says 39, that's a typo. Right? Did you see?
No.
Oh, the mill levy cap. Okay, sorry. There's two different caps.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I misread the debt.
And I may have misspoken. So the debt cap is at $36 million. That's the total amount of debt that can be issued. But the mill levy cap for operation and debt service together is capped at 39 mills, which can then be Gallagherized. And I apologize if I misspoke. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
Thank
Okay,
you.
if not, this is the public hearing, so if there is anybody who wished to speak on this agenda item, now would be the time to come before the
Mr.
board.
O'Leary, answer my question?
Absolutely.
So to answer your question simply, and you can rephrase it if you want to, the intent is the undeveloped portion, so 1, 3, and 4, comprises all the property that's not developed now. So 1, 3, and 4 is intended to bear the burden of the additional debt that's being requested. District 2, where the residents are, is intended to bear the burden of what up to the cap of $8 million. Now, just because we're requesting $36 million of debt authorization doesn't mean we can issue it.
Right.
So we're going to be limited by the assessed valuation and what the financial feasibility of a bond issuance is going to be. But we're asking for that flexibility because we didn't ask for that flexibility wasn't requested when they formed the district originally.
So even though the mill levies will be the same, the future districts or the new district, the
Are
new
pretty
development
much-
is gonna pay the full amount
Pretty much.
to,
Yeah, and all the districts will combine to pay. Your other question was, will the new districts pay on the District 2 debt? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
So another thing that's happened from a statutorial basis, because of the way that they treat it for tax purposes, we also need to designate or to indicate what improvements are localized and what improvements are regional. So ones that are benefit all of the districts versus ones that benefit just that particular subdivision that's constructed. And in doing that, there are some localized improvements that are only District 2 related, streets, water, sewer primarily, But there are other ones that are major county road improvements or major offsites. I think when they originally forecasted it, they didn't anticipate, $10 to $15 million of significant offsite improvements that they now needed in order to complete the development. So those major offsites are more regional in nature, that all the districts can justify paying their taxes to.
Right.
The localized improvements are typically what would be beneficial to that neighborhood.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So once this adjustment is made to the service plan, does it start then over for the years, or does it continuation on from the beginning of the service plan start date?
From a
The
Gallagher.
service plan start date is, what, 30 years?
It's typically, well, your new model is 30 years. So typically it would be 30 years from the date of the assessment of the first debt service mill levy.
Okay.
And statutorily, I don't think we can go past 40 years from the date of formation.
And that's the,
Would you just come talk into the microphone?
Sorry.
please?
that's 30 years is the limit on how long the debt can run from the date of issuance to the date of final repayment. Was that the question you were asking?
Yeah, well, so with this new revision, you've got how many years on what you're doing to the amendment with the service plan then, a total?
So no debt has been issued yet, so that 30 years would not start to run.
Won't start until you make, okay.
Which would be within 5 years, right? Didn't we write in?
Yeah,
We wrote in that the debt issuance for District Number 2 would be by 2024, and by the other districts, it would be within 5 years of the development,
Yes.
per your town code.
Gotcha.
So, and we'd
Okay.
have to come back. We'd have to come back to the town if we needed more than 5 years to issue the.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mayor, sir.
Yes, Mr. Sislowski.
I can't help it. Two questions, I guess, for whoever. And I wondered about that. I made a note in here where you had a 30-year max debt service period. At the end of 30 years, assuming the debt's paid off in full, do the mills go away?
They will usually, what happens is the debt service mill levy portion will drop off, and then the mill levy will reduce to that which is necessary to provide for any operations. Operations would be for anything that's not dedicated to the town, the water district, or our sewer district. So a lot of the localized improvements for parks and entry features and those kinds of things, it'll reduce down quite a bit, because the debt's probably the biggest portion of the mill levy.
Yeah.
But operations will reduce down to just what's necessary to operate. And typically by that time.
Four mills in there.
Right. And typically by that time, it'll be primarily resident controlled. So you'll see resident boards that'll come in and they say, we want another pocket park. So they'll come in and keep their mill levy high for that. But optimistically, it's just reduced down to what's necessary for operations.
And then I have to always ask this question, and I wouldn't, given that this is simply a service plan amendment, but you included a map that shows your proposed water lines.
Yes.
So I only see one. Is there a non-potable system being built in as well?
There is a non-potable system.
Yay.
And it's going to be operated and maintained by the district.
It's not a residential non-pot. I think it's for limited common elements. The homes are not dual system.
Okay.
You're gonna get another.
Any final questions from the board? Was there anybody in the public who wanted to come forward who had a question? This would be the time.
Gloria Belden, P.O. Box 323, Windsor, Colorado. Thank you, Mayor and Board. My question is, where is there room for all this traffic of residents? It's getting overcrowded, I think. Why can't they build out east or out north? That's all, thank you.
Is there anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, and if there's nothing further from my board, then I would seek to close the public hearing, and I would need a motion to do so.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 4 then, an ordinance number 1583, an ordinance of the Town Board of the Town of Windsor, Colorado, approving the First Amendment to the Service Plan for the Ridge at Harmony Road Metropolitan District numbers 4 through 4, and authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the town and the districts. Legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
I don't have anything else to add for the record. I am recommending that you approve this on first reading. And when we come back on second reading, we will convene another public hearing for the benefit of District 2 residents. And then we will also present to you assuming we clear second reading, we will also present to you approval of the revised intergovernmental agreement. So that's all I've got for the record tonight.
Okay.
Question. And I don't know if this should be directed at you, Ian, but I thought we had a policy of requiring dual systems in all new development.
The policy for requiring dual systems applies to those neighborhoods that were irrigated when they were farmland with ditch water. And so this one, although it may have, portions of it may have been irrigated with ditch water, this one has evidently not tipped that.
Well, and Mr. McCarter, I think that, more to the point, anything in the town service plan, any of our customers, we do require dual use system. This is a North Weld County system, so it's not under our purview.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment of appreciation to the Harmony Ridge Metro District and to our legal team. One of the concerns that I've had, the finances are really critical, but for the Metro districts that we've had some concerns from, it had to do with accountability and transparency. And in our new service plan, under items 7, A, and B, there's some requirements that meetings be held within the limits of the town. And every other year, a meeting be held after 5 p.m. so the residents actually have a chance to attend. And also a little bit more detail on notice of nominations for elections. I think, and the fact that you took the time to actually mail to the residents. So I want to compliment our legal team on those additions to the service plan, and to the Metro District for taking some proactive steps in notifying people. It's been my experience that increasing accountability and transparency goes a long way in helping solve what are sometimes perceived problems. So respect to you for doing that. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further comments or questions, then I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, approve the board approve ordinance number 2019-1583.
Second.
Motion on the floor for Mr. Kozlowski with a second for Mr. Bennett, approving ordinance number 2019-1583. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, ordinance number 2018-1581. An ordinance repealing and readopting portions of Chapter 7, Article 4 of the Windsor Municipal Code with respect to trees in, over, and upon public streets in the town of Windsor. This is second reading, legislative action. It will require a supermajority vote. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Before you tonight is the second reading of an ordinance repealing and replacing portions of Chapter 7, Article 4 of the Municipal Code. Crystal, thank you. So the current ordinance is before you basically places the burden of landscaping or trees that may be in private property, but then on, over, in, or above the public right-of-way on the town. So we've had a work session back in September. This was an item on your agenda for first reading last December, and so tonight's discussion is really the second reading to repeal and replace the ordinance as written today. These are some examples that you've seen before where plants or landscaping or trees may be in private property, but they're encroaching onto the public right-of-way. And for the most part, what you're seeing here is the ordinance is recommending the change to place the burden on the private property owner where the tree or landscaping is actually rooted or planted on. So that's pretty much the gist of what we discussed in the work session as well as the first reading and what your ordinance shows tonight. Staff is recommending approval of the ordinance as written. There has been no change to the ordinance that you saw the first time around. The big discussion point that has ensued since the work session as well as the first reading was, and what I'm really seeking tonight beyond approval of the ordinance, is some direction from this board in terms of how you would like for us to handle property owners who may not have the ability to either remove or do maintenance on their own property, that if this ordinance is approved, a tree or shrubs or landscaping that's in and on their property that may encroach the public right of way, if they don't have the ability to pay or do it themselves or pay a contractor, that if the town needs to come in and handle the work for them, how you would like for us to proceed with obtaining payment. So what was asked back in the work session in September was that we create a homeowners assistance program. And so that's what you see on the right and you have in your packet tonight, is a more detailed option where you all approved $10,000 in this current budget, where homeowners would prove that they don't have the ability to pay a contractor or do it themselves, and then the town would come in and either do the work for them on private property or contract that out. And so you can see that they would go through a proof that they don't have the ability to pay. There's some federal guidelines that we follow, just like we have in our scholarship program at the rec center. And then staff would approve, if they met that, up to $1,000 in funds to help them pay for the work per household per year, as long as those funds existed. Or you could choose to do which is on the left, which is our current policy. So if a homeowner can't do some work because they don't have the money to do that, the town would either do the work or contract it out, and we would place a lien on the home. So as I said in the previous slide, we are seeking approval of the ordinance as written, and there has been no change. What I'm also seeking is some board direction in terms of how you would like for us to proceed, whether we would have a homeowners assistance program and facilitate it or not, and just place liens on the home. What that would mean if we had a lien on the home is whenever that home is sold, we would then recoup the money, but that could sit there for many years. Without answering any questions you may have.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
Thank you. Now, I thought I read, is this a reimbursement plan where we would reimburse them up to $1,000, or if we did it?
We could do it either way. The way it's set up now is a reimbursement plan. If the homeowner didn't have the money, we could, for example, if they didn't have the money to front the cost,
Right.
we could choose to cut them a check, but we would have to have receipt, from the company that they're actually doing the work, and that's the bill, and probably look for 3 quotes and those kind of things.
So if it's a $3,000 job and we authorize $1,000, we may still end up putting a lien for the other 2? So there might be
Correct. We may have to do that if it's that large of a job. And that's quite possible with some of the large cottonwood trees, for example, that may be on private property. To take one down is very expensive.
Are any of these smaller jobs, jobs that internally we would do or could do?
We could do some of them. One of the pictures that I showed was a tree that appears to be in private property, goes over the fence and then is kind of protruding into the sidewalk area. We could come in and trim that and just charge our labor costs. So we wouldn't have to contract everything out, but I think to Mr. Baker's point, there are the potential for some expensive projects out there.
And this question might be for Mr. McCarger, but actually we had a homeowner who we know is in encroachment in our right-of-way with some trees. I don't know if any of you have noticed lately, but there's now a fence being put up. Will a fence cure that problem, or is the fence now going to be in the right-of-way?
I think the position we've historically taken when it comes to things other than trees is that if a homeowner puts something physical in our right-of-way and we at any time need to access our right-of-way, the obstruction, the interference will be removed at their expense, and if they want to put it back up, they can. We recommend that people not put us in the position of removing their fences, but if we have to do that, we do
So
that.
that's not necessarily gonna fix the problem, it's just gonna create a different kind of.
It'll
Or
be a-
maybe that we'll have to remove both things, I don't know how.
Could be.
Because the fence is now even closer.
Yeah, it could be, and, you know, our position is, don't for a minute think by putting a fence in our right-of-way, you have permission to occupy our right-of-way. And when it comes to trees and that kind of thing, if we have to remove things that are in the town's right-of-way, we do that. We don't necessarily go out and remove them just because they're in the way, but we remove them when we need to remove them.
Correct. Any other questions? Okay, Dr. Jones.
Well, just to follow up on the mayor's question a little bit, we're probably equipped well enough to take care of most of these, unless it was a really huge tree that,
We're equipped, as you've seen in the pictures, and I think some discussion that we've had in the past, there are a lot of these issues out there. So do we have the ability in the staff? We have the ability and the equipment. What we don't necessarily have is the staff time if all of these issues came at us at once. I could probably go out and list 100 of them today. We are not out there seeking those issues. But for example, if 100 YourGov reports came in, would we have the ability to go handle it in a timely manner? We just don't have the manpower and time to do that. But do we have the ability in terms of equipment and knowledge and expertise? Yes, for the majority of the issues.
if we did it versus a contractor, I assume we probably wouldn't charge contractor prices, is that fair?
Correct. Right, but on the other end, Dr. Jones' board, I get concerned with the liability too for the town. I think you hit a certain size of tree and there's houses and people around, and I just think I'd rather not have the town take that on, not try to bite off too much, too big of a project just for that. You know, if we drop it on a house or there's just a lot of other issues that go out there. So, but you're right, I do believe that if the town's doing the project, the odds are pretty good that our hourly billable rate will be less than they pay a general contractor.
And if you exhausted the $10,000 fund in 6 months, and we had a lot more things to be dealt with, we wait till next year.
I think that'd be a memo to the board to say we've exhausted the $10,000 through June. We had this many jobs, and you'd get some kind of accounting, you know, was that 10 jobs at 1,000? Was it 20 at 500, you know, whatever. And then the board again, you know, you have the purse strings, and so you would either say, let the public know we're out of money this year, or let the public know we found another $5,000 under our mattress and we'll keep the program going. So we would let the board know, but that would be a board decision.
Mr. Sosowski.
There's really sort of two issues here. One is obviously the resolution that would just simply change the existing
Correct.
ordinance. And I have no problem with that. I think I'm even surprised that it hadn't always read the way that we're proposing to change it. I don't think it was necessarily joined at the hip. I think you could approve the ordinance change without necessarily approving the reimbursement or credit program. When I look at this, I look at the application, I guess I start from the standpoint is I'm not sure why the city should ever, or the town should ever bear the cost of a homeowner repairing a nuisance. In fact, the statute that's referenced regarding how to place a lien on property derives from the nuisance statute. There's nothing in there that says unless you can't afford it, you're going to end up with a lien on the house. When I look at the application materials you have here and the nature of who it is that would qualify to get a reduced fee or reimbursement, and you have that ranging from 100% to 50% based on income and the individual producing their tax returns to do that. It's my hope as a retiree that, in fact, this year I would qualify for a 50% reimbursement. What you're ignoring is potential equity in the home, which a lien would capture. So if someone is cash poor and they say, gee, I can't afford to do that, fine, have it done, and we'll do it, and we'll put a lien on your house that has equity, and when you sell the house, we'll get reimbursed. It's only $10,000, and so I have a hard time getting overly excited about it. But the principle simply at stake here is that the taxpayers otherwise, who are paying their taxes looking for city services, are really paying for somebody else's nuisance landscaping. I'm not crazy about part two of this, what you've asked us, but that's a separate issue. It's not the vote we're being asked to talk about today, right? It's just the ordinance that.
You're correct. I think the question, the original question and intent is, and always has been, to change the ordinance as proposed. The second piece of it came out of the original work session from the board in terms of how would we handle that. And staff really, quite frankly, could do either.
Right.
And that's why we're here tonight, asking for some direction. You're correct, we do not have to decide this piece tonight.
Well, and Mr. Sosowski, you'd brought it up at our first reading.
Yeah.
You brought up the question, and again, so during the work session, some of the board members said, are we gonna have any kind of program for people who can't afford this? We talked about the 10,000,
Sure.
and so that was in the budget. I believe you brought it up at the first reading, so we thought, well, we need to make sure the board is still okay with this, so that's why we married the two. So I think it's just, I'm not sure when else we would talk about this, so that's
Right.
why we've kind of married them. And so if there's any fault, I take full responsibility, because we talked and I said, well, let's get it back in front of the board and get direction on that.
I guess you got mine.
Okay.
Just real quick, I mean, my comment would be more about the 10,000, that maybe we do it as a trial program. Maybe it doesn't get used at all, maybe it gets used quickly, then we can decide what we wanna do going forward. Cause there's nothing written in the code that we're obligated to do this forever.
Or maybe we just start out without any of the assistance. Put out the citations and see what happens. And we can always
Come back to that.
come back if we have to. I mean, maybe we're over anticipating here.
Mr. Baker?
Just a refresher, I think I brought up the assistance from the town board and actually another resident. The concern is that they would try to do it themselves or hire a company that wasn't reputable, and they would potentially damage property, their own or someone or the town's. And I guess Mr. Sosowski would say, well, then we sue them or put a larger lien. This was just trying to be a little more compassionate for maybe our older population, that we want them to use a company and not get to those points of damage. That's just the history of where it came up.
And I just want to comment on that. While I understand your viewpoint, Mr. Sosowski, and I would share in your concern about regular taxpayers paying for this, I think where I would be in agreement to looking for this, because I too think that, and I might be totally wrong, but I'm kind of going to guess that a lot of the problems that we're going to find, and the reason why they're there is they are because some of our elderly folks who are still maintaining in their homes but don't have necessarily, I mean, because they bought their homes many years ago, so that's why they still have a home, but they just don't have the means to do a lot of their yard work and services. And so I too think that if we could find some kind of assistance for those kind of folks, because the thing I would not want, that's the main thing that I think everybody has to think about when you're talking about how the town is growing and, things that are accumulating on these homeowners. What will make it at some point in time unbearable for them to even be able to stay in their home? This isn't probably going to do that. I mean, it's $1,000 or $500 or whatever, and so. But again, I would be, especially if it would be to our elderly or somebody truly, a veteran or somebody who just did not have the means. I think there needs to be a source, someplace that maybe they could turn. And with that, we're not really talking about this item. We do have the ordinance that is up for discussion and will take a majority vote this evening. So is there a motion for that this evening?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1581.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson, approving ordinance 2018-1581. All in favor vote yes, opposed no.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, before you call the question, we do need to take public comment. This is second reading, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anybody who wishes to make public comment on this agenda item? Please come forward.
Gloria
Belden. Thank you, Madam Mayor and the board. Couple of things. I think that there should be a public notice through the Windsor Beacon, and let them make the decision, and let them have the honor and respect to help you make the decision. I think that you forget about these people, and either that or let them know, and maybe the community will do something about it, and not be so critical about a levy, or what do you call it? Not a levy, but a lien. Thank you. And it's starting to get really. Oh my gosh, it feels like it's so out of, so communist communication here. And where's the real love and compassion that I've learned and seen people in many years past, and now it's gotten really what I just said. But I think that there should be a paper saying, hey, what if you could, the public, this board and the town of Windsor need to be aware of this stuff. That's what I need to say. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Well, I'd like to respond to the comment, and that's, we'd love to have a paper that covered us, covered our actions
Yep.
and what we're trying to find out. We don't. The Beacon is virtually worthless. We get one thrown on our doorstep maybe once every couple of months, and it's all Fort Collins news. So we would like to have more coverage for sure.
Yeah. And I will say, and they do not call at all. The reporters don't call to get the story from the sources. And not both sides of the story. I'm just gonna reiterate. So no, we do have a motion on the floor. Okay.
And it was second.
And a second. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the motion carries unanimously. So how soon do we need to come back to this other matter? Because if we implemented the ordinance, now I would guess maybe, I mean, do we need to do something formal in a work session, or?
Well, yeah, I think just work session, again, it's already been budgeted, we have the money there. What I don't want to do is for staff to start implementing a program if the majority of the board says, well, is this program right? So, I don't think that this takes tons more discussion. I think the board's discussed it. And I wouldn't mind just taking 10 or 15 minutes in an upcoming work session to have you guys just kind of weigh in, give us direction to fund it or not.
So I would suggest amongst ourselves, if you have some other ideas or thoughts, share them with each other. And then I do know that we've got on the work session, it might be too soon, next week, where we're taking off Housing Authority.
Right.
We will have a few minutes, perhaps, to just kind of come back to this.
I think it'd be easy enough to add that, Mayor.
Okay, that's what I would recommend. Okay. Moving on to item 6, resolution number 2019-06, a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement for the acquisition of real property for water treatment facilities. Legislative action, Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As many of you know, over the last several years, staff has been working with a group of interested municipalities and a water district at trying to locate a suitable site for the acquisition of land for a future water treatment plant. We had a study or two done with some recommendations, and we have zeroed in on a 150-acre tract that is just east of Cobb Lake, north of Weld County Road 88, and east of Weld County Road 13. The map that's in your materials was provided to me by Dennis Wagner. Thank you, Dennis, for that, because it gives you a real clear picture of the real estate we're talking about acquiring with our 3 municipal partners. The intergovernmental agreement does a few things. First of all, it commits the partners to each putting in $250,000 for the $1 million purchase of 150 acres. It also sets up an arrangement so that folks can either stay in, or if they get out, they can be bought out for what they put in, plus a small interest component based on their invested funds rates. Our expectation is that all 4 of the players will stay in, and then in the future we will form a water treatment authority. The lawyers for the group have already drafted a rough draft of that treatment authority IGA, and at some point we will bring that back to you. This treatment plant concept is dependent on continued participation in the Northern Integrated Supply Project, NISP, and is of course dependent on NISP receiving Corps of Engineer approval through the Record of Decision. And so what we're asking you to do is give us the authority to budget the $250,000 and to go forward to negotiate a contract. We will bring the contract back to you for approval, and then assuming that the contract is acceptable, we will close, and then we will set up the water treatment authority, and then we'll figure out how to build the treatment plant. So this is just an intergovernmental agreement to fund the purchase of this 150 acres.
Is the current property under contract? Is it being held for us?
There is a letter of intent that
Letter of
was
intent.
executed by the owner of the property, so it is not under contract.
Okay. Mr. Remeyer.
I just had the question, I mean, I saw that the money to purchase or for our part of the project was gonna come out of the water fund, sewer fund?
The water fund.
Water fund, sorry. Is that something that, obviously the money probably is there, but my question is does it, in the budgetary process that we had already approved for 2019, did it need to be specified this amount of money, or is this up to board discretion? I'm just...
That's a really good question. I had thought about that while I was preparing the resolution and the memo to back it up. I don't believe the purchase of a water treatment plant was specifically budgeted. Mr. Hale can probably help us with that. This resolution authorizing us to enter into the IGA effectively appropriates the $250,000. Dean will need to do a supplemental appropriation to tidy up the budgeting, but this is your legislative authority to go forward with the transaction. So it may not have been budgeted, but to the extent it wasn't, this will send you in that direction.
So it would have to be earmarked in a supplemental budget?
Yes, for sure.
Yes,
Yes, Dr. Jones.
Was any kind of appraisal done on this, or we ballpark?
There were brief negotiations over it, and we were faced with either accepting the terms or passing on the terms. The group feels that this is a reasonable price to pay for 150 acres.
And I believe, Dr. Jones, I haven't seen the appraisal, but I believe that this price per acre is actually less per acre than the person is purchasing the entire thing for. So
That is true.
Yeah, so, and it's at 150 acres for $1 million is $6,600 per acre, which is, I think that again, is group thought, well, that seems pretty reasonable. You know, if it were a lot more developable, we'd be paying 3 times that per acre.
For our new board members, I just want to give them a little bit of history of where this came from. So about 1.5 years ago, the town of Severance, the town of Windsor, Weld County, Eaton, Fort Collins Loveland Water District formed together and started having a conversation about a regional water treatment facility. And in one of those meetings, we actually saw a proposal of what the cost of this would be, which is around $70 to $80 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. The least expensive item on there was this purchase of property, and at that point in time, myself, the mayor of Severance, and the mayor of Eaton said, we might, we sent a broker, an unidentified broker initially, because we wanted somebody, we didn't want them to know it was necessarily initially a governmental agency.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to try to secure and we started looking for properties that would fit our need, and apparently this is one of them. And we felt that, we instructed our folks at that time, with my board's consensus at that time, to, if you can get the deal, get the piece of property, because even if the water treatment facility would never come to fruition, we have something that we can always then sell or do something with, or it's some kind of an asset. Because it was out of $80 million, it was like the smallest item in the budget there. So that's kind of where the background of this came from.
I'll add to what the mayor just said too. Northern Water did a study where they determined that this location in this general vicinity based upon gravity, it being a high point, et cetera, was the right area to acquire a piece of land.
Right.
Thus, what led to the decision to move forward to try to acquire a piece.
And I kind of thought it had fallen off, so when I saw it back on there, I'm like, oh, well, good, somebody was still in hot pursuit, and so that's why we're here today.
Yeah, there's a lot of history to it, but
Yeah.
that's right. It came back into focus for us over the last month.
Exactly.
And Mayor,
Yes.
a couple. I guess, Mr. McCarger, just from a government procurement standpoint, don't we require appraisal to buy real property, or is, I mean, in a sense, the seller is establishing fair market value?
Yeah, in that sense, you're right. There were negotiations, and the municipalities, the partner municipalities, have determined that this is one of the 4 parcels that we were recommended to acquire. And you're right, an appraisal would have been a good idea. The dollar figure we're talking about here is within the range that the broker that we've been working with has recommended. So it was gonna be somewhere between 3 and 7, and then 5 and 10, so we're still within the 5 to 10 range.
And as to the location itself, I kind of looked at, trying to figure out where it was, and according to Google Maps, there's a Cactus Hill lateral that seems to run right diagonally through that property. And I just didn't know if that would be an issue for us if we were to try to.
So when we get under contract, one of the items that we are going to specifically speak to in the contract is a survey. We need to survey the particular part of this property that we want. And so we have yet to devise the legal of what we're acquiring. We're just giving ourselves the ability to survey it, to do geotesting on it, and eventually narrow down to a parcel that works for everyone.
And I guess if we imagine a water treatment plant there, it seems to be up in that north area where Mr. Wagner, certainly with respect to a sewer line, we had some issues. If we were running pipelines from here to the town, are we gonna be running into an expensive proposition, or?
Well, the sewer, is because you have a lot more difference in elevation and run the grades. Water lines are great that they're force main and you can run them a lot shallower.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, I think geotechnically, of course, we'll have some challenges, but I don't think near to the scope of sewer.
I don't suppose there's like 12 units of CBT tied to this line?
Oh, well, actually, we're doing it for NISP, so in theory, there's 3,300 acre feet.
Is this
We
property
know about those.
in Larimer County?
Yes.
Is that the, okay.
No, wait, it is just in Weld County. It's just on the east.
Oh, it is Weld County.
It's just east of the county line.
County Road 13, it's on the east
Okay.
side.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brenner.
I apologize if I missed in reading, but water, mineral rights? Are there any water and mineral rights going with this property?
We haven't gotten there.
Okay. Underground water?
I'm not ruling it out. We haven't discussed that in detail with the seller.
Okay, so that would be the next step when we actually do a purchase contract.
Yes, we would need to do title work once we get under contract, we would do the
Okay.
title work.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Rennemeyer?
Where are we at with the other partners in this, are we the first to take action on this?
We are the first to take action on it, and then the town of Eaton is going to take action on it within the week. Severance will, I think, be the last of us because of where their meeting schedule goes. And then the Fort Collins Loveland Water District is going to take it up. Their council informed me somewhere in between us and Severance. So everybody's driving in the same direction, but it won't happen all this week.
Well, in kind of your question, I think that the sense that we've had is that all the other partners are still well engaged on this.
Yeah, my communication is they all intend to
Yeah,
move forward.
yeah, everyone's in. It's just a question of when they'll get official action. We're the first.
But if not all 4 partners would happen to agree, it would come back because.
That's right. Yeah, if Eaton bagged out at the last minute, we'd have to discuss with partners, is it still worth it? Now we're all into 33, a little bit more money.
Exactly, I'm
each
just making sure that we aren't obligating ourselves if in fact
You're
the
not.
price tag would go up to us.
Right now, it's a $250,000 price tag. If that changes, we'll be back.
Anything else? Okay, if not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I would move for the approval of resolution number 2019-06.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Dr. Jones with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett. All in favor signify with yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 7, our financial report from November 2018. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In your packet tonight is the November 2018 financial report. We are very close to the end of the year, and we are in a very good spot to close out the year. Both our sales and use tax collections have gone over our budget amount for the year. We actually did in October, but we're putting some more distance on that. Sales tax itself is up 17.49% over November of 2017. So we had a good year here in 2018. Further down in this report, I mentioned that we had budgeted $10.9 million in sales tax for 2018. I said in here, I think we will come in around $13.6 million this year. Debbie gave me the December sales tax report today, and we did in fact come in at roughly $13.6 million. I think the number was 13,577, something like that, but rounded up to 13.6. As far as the use tax, the one thing I noticed was for November, we did not quite get to our monthly collection requirement, although we still are over the budget collections for the year. Not to worry, again, today I looked at the December use tax collections, and we collected over $500,000 in use tax in December, so no worries there. As far as the expenditures go, we are where we should be for this point in the year. Being that we have only 1 month left, I think we'll be okay budget-wise. We will probably have to do a supplemental budget for infrastructure that we accepted, and that will probably happen here in February or March. I would like to get it done before the auditors get here at the end of March. So that being said, and short of answering any questions, that is my report for this evening.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Moyer? Well, thank you for another fine job then.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to item D, communications. Communications from our town attorney.
Some of you may have seen that this morning the Supreme Court announced its decision in the Martinez case, which overturned the Court of Appeals decision. What that really means is it is a victory for the industry in that the Court of Appeals had interpreted the statute in a certain way that would have required the Oil and Gas Commission in its rulemaking to make oil and gas regulations subject to the environment. And the Supreme Court disagreed with the Court of Appeals on that and has essentially said that as long as the rulemaking is consistent with environmental concerns, then the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is discharging its statutory responsibility. So it is seen as a victory for the industry and is fairly consistent with how the Supreme Court has read the statute over the years. I will be providing you separately a legal update that includes a little more detail about Martinez, but that will be coming to you over the next week or so. That's all I've got.
Okay, communications from town staff. There is a sub-item here, the Windsor liquor licensing report, fourth quarter. Ms. Emo or Mr. McCarter, did you want to mention anything about that, or it's just a report in our packet?
It's in your materials.
Refer to, okay. Mr. Wagner, did you have anything? Mr. Balstead?
I just wanted to call your attention, there is one other sub-communications item, site plan summary for the Valley Center, fourth filing, lots 1 through 3. And if town board has any questions or comments, please let me know. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Lucas? Chief? Okay. Mr. Moyer, anything further? Communications from town manager.
Yes, Your Honor, just really briefly, I mentioned to the board earlier today that we had a meeting with CDOT earlier. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss kind of their scope, to review Highway 392 and 257 and whether or not there's any way to reroute that traffic, reroute those corridors for the town. So a written report will be forthcoming, but I just wanted to let the board know that they did want to get in front of you in February. So I'm going to take that future meetings agenda and play with it a little bit to reschedule and get them in front of you right away, because I know that this board cares a lot about traffic, cares a lot about our streets, and I know that this is key for you. And then I also want to let you know that CDOT wanted to have their public meeting in Windsor, so they see how centric, even though these corridors touch other municipalities, they wanted to have that in Windsor in March. And most importantly, and I'm glad you're all sitting down, their intent is to be done with this in June of this year.
Yeah,
So
fabulous.
we are taking over-under bets. Dennis Wagner has a pool, so if you want to get in. But that is our goal right now. So I'm happy to see how quickly and how expeditiously Johnny Olson and his team are taking this. So it's all good news. And again, that report will be coming to you later this week.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may make
Yes.
a quick comment on that. If anything were to happen to me between now and June, keep me on life support, please. Because I really want to still be around.
I assume
That is on the
you-
record, actually. That's your
Don't
living
let
will
Julie
on the
pull the
record.
plug.
The living will.
Yeah.
Okay. Communications from town board. Dr.
Just one
Jones.
thing, Mayor, I saw in the weekly report that the lighting the Christmas lights are coming down in downtown this week, and I think they did a fantastic job. It was really well done this year, and kudos to the forestry group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The only thing I would add is this Saturday is Coffee with the Mayor, the 19th, at Dunkin' Donuts from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. It's going to be a little bit crowded in there, but they requested and wanted to have it there. So we'll do our best to still make it amicable for a good conversation. We did want to also maybe just make note, we did have some technical difficulties this evening. And do you just want to make mention of that, just so folks at home can hear why they're maybe not seeing us in their normal venue tonight?
Yeah, absolutely, Your Honor. So this weekend, the town connected a new generator, so it's important for the town hall to have that if we do have any power interruptions. Unfortunately, though, when we set it up, there's some power bumps and outages in town hall, and it looks like that generator actually took out our broadcasting modulator, and the modulator is a piece of equipment that basically converts our signal into what Comcast needs. So we're able to broadcast on YouTube, we're able to record, but we actually can't broadcast out to Comcast based on that. So we just became aware of that today at about 4 o'clock when our staff started getting ready for this meeting, because we haven't used a TV since then. And we're going to have the consultant here tomorrow, and hopefully we have everything tip-top and operational for the next board meeting.
Okay. And with that, I would seek a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved?
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a tie from several board members for adjournment this evening. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Crystal, you can record me as a third.
Okay.